Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on the 2022 State of Organic Seed Report. I'm your host, Alice Formiga of eOrganic, and I'd like to welcome our presenters today, Kiki Hubbard and Jared Zeistro of the Organic Seed Alliance. I'd like to thank the Organic Seed Alliance for partnering with us to produce this webinar, and I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers. Kiki Hubbard is the Director of Advocacy and Communications for Organic Seed Alliance. Her work on seed policy spans 20 years in the areas of antitrust, biotechnology, intellectual property, and organic regulation. She leads the State of Organic Seed Project, and she leads federal seed policy initiatives targeting Congress and federal agencies. Jared Zeistro is the Research and Education Director at Organic Seed Alliance. He's worked in the seed industry for over 15 years, managing seed production at 2 farms and conducting research and education projects, including many variety trials and plant breeding workshops and field days. He also has a PhD in plant breeding and plant genetics from the University of Wisconsin. So with that, I'm going to hand over the control to you, Kiki, and just click on that PowerPoint once to get started.
Thank you so much, Alice. It's always a pleasure to partner with eOrganic, and we're really honored to have this opportunity to share a pretty comprehensive overview of our State of Organic Seed Report and the most recent findings in our 2022 report. To get started, for those of you who aren't familiar with Organic Seed Alliance, we are a mission-driven organization that works nationally to ensure that growers have the organic seed they need to be successful. And our mission is to advance ethical seed solutions to meet food and farming needs in a changing world. We achieve this mission through participatory plant breeding projects that focus on organic seed systems and other organic seed research, as well as practical education. We focus a lot on training growers on how to grow seed, especially for the commercial marketplace, using organic practices. And then we also work to achieve this mission through our policy advocacy work. I am going to begin by giving an overview of our State of Organic Seed Project before handing it over to my coworker, Jared, to cover a lot of our findings before highlighting a few of our recommendations coming out of our most recent report, and of course, leaving as much time as possible for Q&A. We want to hear your questions and open it up for a conversation before saying goodbye today. So our State of Organic Seed Project is an ongoing project of Organic Seed Alliance, and it helps us monitor organic seed systems here in the United States. Everything from how much organic seed certified organic producers are using to their organic plant breeding needs, as well as how the organic seed regulation is being enforced by organic certifiers, and much, much more. Every 5 years, we are committed to releasing this report that serves both as a progress report on, as I said, the state of organic seed systems here in the US, as well as an action plan for increasing the organic seed supply, while also fostering seed grower networks and policies that aim to decentralize power and ownership in our seed systems. And this last goal is especially important to us because we know that the dominant players in the seed trade, namely chemical and biotechnology firms, are not delivering organic seed that meet the diverse and regional needs of growers. Oftentimes the seed they are delivering isn't even appropriate for use in certified organic production. And so one of our goals with the project is to create a plan for, again, fostering more decentralized power and ownership in our seed systems so that we have systems that can be responsive to the diverse and regional needs of organic growers, regardless of where they grow, what they grow, and at what scale. We also know that the benefits of expanding organic seed, both in the field and marketplace, go well beyond simply helping certified organic growers meet a regulatory requirement to use organic seed when commercially available. We believe the benefits of providing genetics that are well adapted to a grower's region and their environmental conditions will only help their success and also help mitigate risks associated with our changing climate and more extreme and unpredictable weather events as well. We also know that by expanding organic seed production, we are expanding all the benefits that come with organic agriculture more broadly, including having fewer synthetic chemical inputs entering our ecosystems as well as our food supply. This is now our third update to the State of Organic Seed Project. I'm sorry, our most recent cover is not showing up here, but our first report was released in 2011. And again, we have been committed to releasing this report every 5 years since that time. We now have 15 years worth of data to help us understand trends in, as I said before, organic seed sourcing, in public investments going toward organic plant breeding and other organic seed research, among many other aspects of our organic seed system. And in our most recent report, we collected more data than we ever have before, which I'll touch on here shortly. But first, I want to go over just a few of the most important objectives of the State of Organic Seed Project. There are several more objectives listed in our report that, again, you can find at stateoforganicseed.org. But first of all, as I mentioned just a minute ago, we want to support organic producers in meeting the National Organic Program's organic seed requirement. We are celebrating 20 years this year of the National Organic Standards being in existence. And when the National Organic Program was established in 2002, there was hardly any certified organic seed available. We've made a lot of progress in growing the organic seed supply. And again, one of the objectives of this project is to create an action plan that further supports growing that organic seed supply and helping organic growers meet the regulatory requirement to use certified organic seed and planting stock. Another objective of the report of the project is to identify urgent organic plant breeding and seed research needs. As you'll learn here shortly, we put together a database of all the organic plant breeding and other organic seed research projects that have been funded over the last 5 years in order to better understand where investments are going. And then we use some of our survey data from organic growers as well as seed growers to better understand what the research priorities need to be moving forward. We also want one of the objectives of this project to address barriers to the organic seed market faced by Black and Indigenous and other people of color who currently face prejudice and harm in our current agricultural system. We humbly acknowledge that a social justice lens was missing from our previous 2 reports, and we are working hard to remedy that through ongoing partnership development, as well as ensuring that these objectives and principles in the way of supporting racial equity and addressing past harms is part of this project moving forward. To that end, one of the main objectives too of this project is to promote policies and actions that increase the availability and diversity of organic seed, and again, that foster decentralized seed systems. Now, there are also more than a dozen principles guiding this project, principles that underscore the values that we see as important to growing, again, diverse but more diverse organic seed systems. One of these principles is that we believe organic food should begin with organic seed. Again, not only because it's a regulatory requirement, but also because of the many benefits that we believe come with expanding organic seed availability, both in the marketplace as well as organic seed planted in the field. Another principle is that seeds are a vital yet vulnerable natural resource that we know must be managed in a way that enhances its long-term viability and genetic integrity. And we also strongly believe that agricultural research should serve more than one goal and should strive to increase benefits for all living systems, including plants, animals, humans, and the soil. As I mentioned before, we have updated our principles to center more of a social justice lens and believe that action must be taken to remove structural barriers to a just and equitable seed and food system. And in seed systems in particular, there is a need for principles, policies, and practices that ensure the equitable exchange of seed with appropriate acknowledgement, compensation, as well as consent. And this is important to curtailing the negative impacts of concentrated ownership in our seed supply, as well as to support and enhance innovation moving forward. We also believe that growers and their communities have the right to determine whether and how culturally important seeds are used and shared in order to avoid trends in biopiracy. We also want to center Indigenous knowledge and recognize that it is the foundation of organic farming and agroecology, and to uplift these partnerships and leadership in this project. In important ways, these principles and others that are in our report, but that I didn't just mention, in important ways, these principles align with iPhone's principles for organic agriculture and can be captured under the four umbrellas of the principle of health, care, fairness, and ecology. As I mentioned before, our most recent report is comprised of more data than we've ever collected before. We have 7 data sets informing our findings and recommendations. The first of which is a national survey we conducted with our friends at Organic Farming Research Foundation. The survey focused on certified organic producers, so farmers and ranchers, asking questions about how much organic seed they're sourcing, what they view as organic plant breeding priorities, as well as challenges to sourcing more organic seed. We also conducted an in-depth survey of organic seed producers, and this includes organic seed companies. We, in particular, wanted to better understand what their challenges were in seed production and in growing their capacity for organic seed production, both production challenges in the field as well as non-production challenges, such as barriers to organic certification or the cost of certification and more. We surveyed organic plant breeders and other organic researchers who were listed as PIs, principal investigators, in the organic research projects that that are part of the database we compiled for the last 5 years. Again, projects that focus on organic plant breeding and other organic seed research. And through the survey, we wanted to better understand the successes as well as challenges that these researchers faced. We also, for the third time, conducted a survey with organic certifiers to better understand their internal policies and practices when it comes to enforcing the organic seed requirement, and what their needs were to support more consistent and stronger enforcement of the seed requirement. Finally, we leaned again on our friends at Organic Farming Research Foundation, where they hosted 16 focus groups across the US, representing more than 100 organic farmers. And we pulled from this data as well to inform our findings in state of organic seed. Some of the organic seed producers who responded to our survey also agreed to a one-on-one interview with our staff so that we could dig even deeper into some of their challenges and needs from an organic seed producer perspective. So with that, so again, a quick overview of our methods. We have so much data, and we're also happy to share this time around that most of these data sets are available to you publicly through an interactive web page, which I believe my colleague Florentina is going to pop into the chat box here. Give this web page a moment to load, given how much data is there, but you can search these various data sets by region, by crop type, and by other categories as well. So we're really excited to make this data much more accessible to the public this time around. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jared to go through some of our key findings and to share with you what we found out from all this data. Jared.
Thank you, Kiki. I'm happy to be here and happy to share a little bit of what we found out. There were, as Kiki pointed out, many different data sets, and even within each of these surveys, we asked a fairly comprehensive, or as much as we could. We always have ideas for the future, but a fairly comprehensive set of questions. We won't be presenting on all of it by any means today, but you can follow those links to see the full report, to browse the data yourself. What I want to kind of focus on in this part of the presentation is touching on really the status as best as we can grasp of organic seed usage, and then look at some kind of the barriers that we're seeing, some of the opportunities that might exist that we found from these surveys. So as Kiki said, it's been one of the strengths, I think, of this project is that we've done this now 3 times over 15 years. So we begin to see this series this time series data where we can see if we're making progress and where we're not making progress. We also have in this year, thanks to our partnership with OFR, but in the past, thanks to our partnerships with the certifying agencies and other partnering groups, have managed to get a fairly wide survey of certified organic producers. As you can see, so this is a map of where the respondents were located, and you can see that there's certainly clustering here in the West Coast, in the Midwest, and the Northeast, but that geographic clustering is fairly well mirrors the overall distribution, geographic distribution of organic farms. And so we feel like, well, there's always a need to, and there's always opportunities to be able to survey more deeply and more broadly, that we anticipate that this data is somewhat representative. There are a few other ways that we tried to look at that too, in terms of trying to make sure that we weren't just hearing from the people who care deeply about organic seed. The first thing that I want to touch on in that category of status of where we're at with organic seed is looking at, with the goal ultimately of organic producers using organic seed, how many organic producers are using all organic seed for their operation? What we found was that when we first did this survey back in 2011, about 25% of producers were using 100%, were using all organic seed in their operation. And over the years, that really hasn't changed. We see about the same percent of responding producers using 100% organic seed. One thing that we did see that was an encouraging trend is digging into this data a little more deeply and splitting out some of the different groups. We noticed that vegetable producers who were at the smaller scale, less than 50 acres, so small and medium scale vegetable producers, they in fact were using more organic seed since when our 2011 survey. You can see this general trend upwards here. However, we didn't see that kind of upward trajectory in field crops, forage crops, nor did we see it in cover crops. So looking here at field crops, the overall percent of organic seed being used. So this is, just to be clear, this is when we asked an individual farmer how much organic seed are you using. They would report a percent of their acreage that they planted to organic seed. And then this is averaging across those respondents. So on average, field crop acreage, the responding field crop producers were planting about 72% of their field crop acreage back in 2011. And you can see that really hasn't changed. I would say this is within the margin of error. It's either going down or it's basically the same. Likewise, if we look at forage acreage, it has remained somewhere around 60% of forage acres have been planted to organic seed. This has been the same over these last 15 years. And cover crops, we didn't ask specifically about cover crop seed sourcing, or at least we didn't ask in the exact same way back in 2011. So we only have the two data points here, but we can see that it's between 2016 and 2021. It's about the same, around 66, 67, 68%. When we look at that status of where we're at and where the trajectory is, one of the next questions that we want to ask is, what are the incentives for growers potentially to be using more organic seed? What are the barriers that are keeping growers from being able to use or wanting to use more organic seed? And that's what I'm going to spend a fair bit of time here digging into with you all. So one of the questions that we looked at was, we found in our past surveys that certifiers, as the kind of ultimate connection between the regulations and the producers, that they potentially can have some influence on whether or not producers are sourcing organic seed. So we wanted to find out whether or not certifiers are requesting greater steps, additional steps beyond just looking through 3 catalogs, whether they're requesting producers take greater steps to source organic seed. And what we noticed actually is a trend downward, that in 2011, 61% of respondents said, yes, certifiers are asking us to take additional steps beyond just looking at 3 catalogs. But then in 2016 and 2021, we're seeing, around 35-40% of respondents are saying that certifiers are asking them to take greater steps. So we see a decrease in the amount of producers who are saying that certifiers are asking them to take greater steps to source organic seed. As I kind of alluded to earlier, the relevance of this is that though we can't actually say this is causational, we can certainly say that we see this association with, and I'm sorry, some of these words are pretty small on this slide, but this is the cover crops on the far left, at least on my screen, and then field crops, forage crops, and vegetable crops, and comparing whether or not certifiers requested extra steps to source organic seed and how that relates to the ultimate percent of organic seed being used. So what we see is basically across the board, across all these crop types, when certifiers request extra steps, there is an increase. Respondents who say that certifiers requested extra steps also say that they're using, in general, more organic seed compared to the respondents that didn't say that certifiers requested extra steps from them for organic seed sourcing. So again, though we can't say this is a direct causation, we certainly see the strong association. We see it across crop types, and we saw this. This is just showing the 2021 data, but we've seen this in past years when we've asked this question as well. So beyond that certifier push, what are some of the barriers that might be leading producers to not source as much organic seed? The number one here is variety unavailability. So we asked, how much was the unavailability of specific varieties in organic seed a factor in your decision not to purchase organic seed? And we asked the same question in 2016 as we did in 2021. And you can see that this is a significant factor, and continues to be a significant factor. If anything, maybe slightly higher percent are finding that variety availability is really a significant factor in not sourcing organic seed. Digging a little more deeply into the data, one area where we noticed and this backs up a lot of anecdotal data that we've heard directly from certifiers and from producers, is when we look at larger scale producers, in particular larger vegetable producers, a unique challenge that they have in sourcing organic seed often is that they are working with processors or wholesale buyers who may specify in the contracts that a specific variety is required, or may even be supplying the seed themselves. And if that variety is not certified organic, now the grower's not able to source organic seed because they're trying to meet the requirements of their contract. So what we see is that for growers above 50 acres, vegetable producers, what we found was that this requirement from the buyer or processor of specifying exactly what variety they can grow, that is a significant factor for, it was about a quarter of producers in 2016 and has gone up to close to a third in 2021. Despite all of that, in terms of seeing, a general, lack of increase in organic seed, with the exception of that bright spot among smaller producers, when we ask whether or not organic seed is important to the integrity of organic food, and whether varieties that are specifically bred for organic production support organic producers' success and support the success of the organic industry, we hear overwhelmingly that yes, producers believe organic seed is important to the integrity of organic food. And yes, varieties bred for organic production are important. So there's clearly a desire and a belief in the value of organic seed and organic plant breeding. So that gets us back to kind of these barriers. One thing, and I'll be honest, we don't have a great answer for why this is, but it's certainly concerning and something that we're going to continue to look into. Is one, in the past, we found that somewhere around 40% or so of respondents have saved some of their own seed that they're using either for their own on-farm use or a subset of them selling commercially. This year around, we saw that number drop from around 40% down to around 25%. So there's a drop that we observed, at least among the respondents to this sample, in terms of who is saving seed. And of course, that is an important factor in organic seed usage if you're not able to save your own seed. I want to hand this over to Kiki because she's the most familiar with this Certifier survey that we did.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, just quickly, I want to share a few highlights from our most recent Organic Certifier survey. In 2020, we distributed the survey to all accredited certifying agencies here in the US. More than 20 of them responded, and we estimate that collectively these 22 ACAs represent about 80%, if not more than 80%, of certified organic farms. According to these certifiers who responded, only 16% of them believe that organic producers go beyond 3 catalogs or sources to find organic seed. In the words of one certifier, we need to constantly reinforce that the grower needs to do more work to locate or trial organic seed. More than half of the certifiers responding said that more certifier and inspector trainings would be helpful to more consistent and strong enforcement of the organic seed regulation. 80% of them pointed to more educational materials and outreach to organic producers themselves, especially in the way of understanding organic seed availability. And then more than 80% of certifiers responding said that access to organic variety trial data is useful. And lastly, and perhaps not surprisingly, they identified the need for a comprehensive database. We still, here in the United States, do not have a reliable and comprehensive database listing all organic seed available. And that continues to be both a challenge and need. Jared, if you pop to, thank you. And I quickly wanted to share this quote from a certifier responding to the survey who said, processors demanding varieties in contract that are not available as organic continues to be the most significant roadblock to increasing use of organic seed in large row crop production. And we wanted to include this quote to underscore one of the findings that Jared shared a few minutes ago, where we are seeing that processor or buyer contracts that either dictate a certain variety be grown by contracted growers, or they're supplying seed directly to their contracted growers. Increasingly, we're seeing this as more of a barrier to sourcing more organic seed because either the seed they're providing or the seed they're asking growers to grow is not available in an organic form. So we're seeing this trend increase again, both from the organic producer's perspective as well as from the certifier perspective as well. Jared, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Kiki. So I want to look at another data set that we have been using, have developed for the past several of these state of organic seed reports, and that's looking at the public investment in organic seed and organic plant breeding in terms of addressing these needs for organic seed supply. Kiki will, at the end of this, walk through many of the different recommendations, but certainly, investing in this research and looking at the needs of seed producers that we're going to get to in a second are two key pieces. So I want to dig into this a little bit. Specifically, just to give you a little bit of clarification of what this data set is, we looked through the USDA grant databases and the grant databases of several granting agencies, as well as some public or as well as some foundations, to look for projects that were focused on organic seed and organic plant breeding. And we found about a little less than 200 projects, and then looked at those projects to identify what topics they were working on, what regions they were focused in, what the funding source was, what crops they were working on. Overall, though, what we found was that this is looking at from 1996, when some of the first funding became available for organic research, through to last year. We found that in the last 5 years, there has been an increase in research investment. Specifically, a total of close to $40 million has been invested. Most of this coming from public funding, as we'll see in a second. Of that, the single largest by far source of organic seed and organic breeding investment from a public source was OREI, the Organic Research and Education Initiative. You can see as well SARE and several other smaller pools that have also served really important needs, especially regionally, especially for producer-led projects. When we look at the topics for what this research is, as best as we've been able to classify it, what we find is that research that is focused on organic plant breeding or organic variety trials has traditionally been the largest recipient of this funding, whereas seed production research and more enterprise or systems development research has been a smaller slice of that pie. Regionally, the largest funded region isn't a region, it's the multi-region projects. So these are ones that span across the US typically, or at least across multiple regions. And then within regions, you can see that the North Central region and the Western region, these are based on the SARE regions, received substantially more than the Southern region and the Northeast region. So as I had mentioned, beyond the support that public research ultimately can give to organic seed systems, organic seed supply rests on organic seed producers and rests on their success to be able to grow and distribute seeds in a sustainable way, both environmentally, economically. And so this year, or this round of our State of Organic Seed, was the first time that we really looked more closely at the needs of seed producers. We interviewed, I think it was a little over, it's like 127 seed producers and organic seed producers, as well as seed companies, which often were people wearing the same hat, both producer and company, and asked them many questions around kind of their challenges and their input on the seed system. Here's a little look at kind of the demographics of where we heard from and who we heard from. Vegetable producers being the largest, though of course many people were growing multiple crop types, and smaller scale seed producers that we heard from, a range of sizes. Looking at challenges, we asked producers to evaluate, whether we had a long list of challenges and asked them to say, whether these were not a challenge or somewhat of a challenge or a serious challenge. And across all the regions, what we saw as some of the top challenges were achieving adequate seed yields, controlling weeds, estimating yields, managing climatic effects, controlling insect pests, controlling disease pressure, and adapting to climate change. Though we saw that as a general trend, different regions did show, producers in different regions did have different top needs. For example, in the southern region, we saw more needs for specific seed infrastructure, where challenges like seed cleaning and harvest costs and sourcing appropriate seed harvest and cleaning equipment were top challenges. And in the Northeast, there was a recognition of climate challenges being some of the most challenging things for Northeast seed producers. Overall, what we found was that producers found that climate, both the we asked a few different ways, but both kind of the current and anticipated future climate changes, that this was something that either is harming or has the potential to harm their seed production operations and their ability to produce seed. Beyond production challenges, we also asked a similar set of questions around non-production challenges. And the top non-production challenges that we heard from organic seed producers included managing business activities, developing infrastructure, accessing labor, finding and developing markets, and then the cost of organic certification. Again, there were some regional variations here, in particular, highlighting that in the North Central region, so covering a lot of the Midwest, that seed producers there highlighted a challenge around GE contamination, as well as farmer relations, which may have been somewhat related. One of the things that we wanted to find out about was how intellectual property interacted with seed producers' ability to grow seed. And what we found, we looked at several different forms of intellectual property, from utility patents to PVPs to MTAs or to the open source seed initiative. And there was a general consensus that utility patents were found to be very harmful. Finally, we wanted to get a sense of looking at the seed producers and seed companies as part of a seed system, an integrated system. And we wanted to find out what if producers had an opportunity to envision their perfect seed system, kind of what would that look like? A resilient seed system, one that well, we let them define it for themselves. And this is an example of a fairly emblematic way that organic seed system was defined by one producer. It said, a resilient seed system is one that can succeed in the face of challenges of climate, political, and market force impacts, utilizes the decentralized network of growers, provides widespread education and communication across all participants, and fosters cooperation and sharing for the benefit of all. And this is another example. A resilient seed system includes the participation and perspectives of many people: large farms, small farms, gardeners, researchers, and breeders, people of color, women, those that have long been excluded. There will be opportunities, I think, to look at the seed system in more depth. And I think if we have a good recording that our co-author, Liza Wood, did as part of the Organic Seed Growers Conference, diving more deeply into some of these questions and attributes of the current seed system and what a resilient seed system might look like. But to summarize, we did see that this is kind of a network map looking at how information and seeds and market connections join seed growers and seed companies, as well, and researchers together. And we found that it really is largely a decentralized and robust network where there's really this interweaving of connections among many different producers and other actors in the seed system. So with that overview of some of what we found, I want to hand it over to Kiki.
Thank you so much, Jared. You do such a wonderful job of unpacking our findings. So I want to start by just articulating some of the takeaways here. As I said before, we're excited to be celebrating the 20-year anniversary of the federal organic regulations here in the United States. And in that time, over the last 20 years, we've seen tremendous growth in the organic seed supply. As I said before, when the federal rules were implemented, there was hardly any certified organic seed available. We now have dozens of organic seed suppliers and many more organic seed producers working hard to fill the organic seed supply. We've also seen, as Jared explained, major increases in organic plant breeding and research funding, especially public funding going toward these types of projects. We have seen more resources and trainings going to support organic certifiers. I'm going to share a few of those here in a moment. And we are also seeing through our data growing understanding, especially among organic producers, that organic seed is important. Organic seed is important to the integrity of the organic label. Consumers expect organic products to be produced organically along the entire supply chain, and that begins with seed. And we're also seeing a growing understanding, as Jared shared, among producers who understand that organic plant breeding is important to their success and that of the broader organic industry. And yet, our data also shows that over the course of these years, we have seen no meaningful improvement in organic seed sourcing in absence of regulatory changes. And that is the one piece that we haven't seen any progress or improvement. And in the words of one organic certifier, again, who responded to our certifier survey, not much is changing on its own. So there may need to be a change in the regulations to move this issue forward. And my colleagues and I agree. And that's why we are labeling improvements to the organic seed regulation as the top priority moving forward. It stands out more than it did even 5 years ago that in order to make more progress and quicker progress in ensuring that more organic food begins with organic seed, we need to see policy catch up to progress in other areas that I just mentioned, whether it's the organic seed supply, trainings and education, and again, the understanding and belief that organic seed is important to organic production. So we strongly support and are advocating for the National Organic Program to adopt and implement the National Organic Standards Board's 2018 recommendation, which essentially would update the organic seed requirement by mandating that organic operations demonstrate improvement in organic seed sourcing each year. And there was also a good recommendation that we support coming out of the NOSB in 2019 to update the guidance document that serves as a touchstone for especially organic certifiers and inspectors when it comes to enforcing the organic seed requirement. We will continue to advocate for the adoption of both of these proposals coming out of the NOSB. And the National Organic Program has indicated that they are revisiting, updating the organic seed regulation as part of their rulemaking priorities for this year, which we were excited to hear about at the most recent NOSB meeting. We also are hoping that the NOP as well as the NOSB, with NOSB support, will take seriously our newest findings that again demonstrate that organic buyers and processors and the seed requirements within their contracts are increasingly serving as a barrier to sourcing more organic seed, especially when it comes to larger scale vegetable producers. We believe that there needs to be a way to hold organic handlers, especially accountable to the organic seed regulation. And in important ways in these situations, organic growers oftentimes have their hands tied in terms of what seed they can grow. As I mentioned before, there's still a need for a comprehensive organic seed database, both to support organic growers in sourcing more organic seed, as well as to support certifiers in enforcing the organic seed regulation. And we also heard loud and clear from certifiers that ongoing investments in trainings for inspectors and certifiers, as well as organic producers, would be helpful in ensuring that more organic seed is being used, as well as to provide more clarity and guidance on best practices for enforcing the organic seed requirement. The Accredited Certifiers Association has produced some very good, strong best practices for enforcing the organic seed requirement. You can find those on their website. And even more recently, last fall, the National Organic Program launched a new course focused on organic seed sourcing, focused on the organic seed regulation as part of their Organic Integrity Learning Center, which offers a number of courses related to the organic roles. And finally, my team at Organic Seed Alliance a few years ago updated our growers guide for conducting on-farm variety trials to better support organic growers in conducting their own variety trials on their farm, to not only compare how organic varieties in the marketplace compare to conventional varieties they might rely on, but to explore new organic varieties in the marketplace that may do as well, if not better, than conventional varieties that they have relied on over the years. And as Jared mentioned, public research investments are an important part to supporting organic growers and to supporting ongoing growth in the organic seed supply. We are very pleased that funding for the Organic Research and Extension Initiative, the OREI program, this funding more than doubled in the last Farm Bill, which is such a success. And we're so excited to see the increase in this funding. And this funding needs to continue to increase. We know that organic research investments pale in comparison to research investments going toward projects that primarily benefit conventional growers. So we hope in the coming years to see funding going toward organic plant breeding and other organic seed research increasing. And also seeing that more project priorities focus on the participation of historically underrepresented seed growers as part of these efforts. We also know that more training is needed, especially for organic producers, 40% of them who responded to our survey who indicated that they're interested in incorporating commercial organic seed production into their operation. This would help us expand the organic seed supply, expand independence among organic growers with their own seed supply by saving and producing more seed on their farm. And again, by expanding our organic seed production capacity, we can help fulfill some of the current organic seed supply gaps. So training more organic seed producers is another key recommendation coming out of this. And related to the research funding I just mentioned, prioritizing those challenges, both production and non-production challenges that we identified in the seed producer survey, will be an important part of our advocacy moving forward as well. Only 5% of the research funds that Jared outlined earlier, only 5% of those went toward challenges that organic seed producers face. So in other words, organic seed research funding priorities. And we'd like to see a lot more resources going to address seed producer challenges. We also see a need and are hearing from various stakeholders that there is an opportunity to create a feedback loop to identify which varieties organic producers can find in organic form. So in other words, creating feedback loops between certifiers, growers, as well as organic seed producers and seed companies so that everyone is more aware of what the organic supply needs are. What varieties are growers consistently not finding in an organic form, creating some type of feedback loop and to help address that gap in knowledge. And then finally, policy action is urgently needed to address climate change. We know that climate change increasingly is making our seed and food system less secure. And we heard this loud and clear from growers who participated in our surveys for the State of Organic Seed report. So this will also rise to the top as a key policy priority moving forward. Our report includes, goodness gracious, probably more than 20 recommendations. So I encourage you to check out the report and look more closely at the other recommendations identified in our report. And with that, I want to quickly acknowledge some thanks, acknowledge some partners. First of all, it was actually the USDA's OREI program that allowed Organic Seed Alliance and Organic Farming Research Foundation to conduct the National Organic Producer Survey and to pull together our respective reports. So huge thanks to USDA's OREI program. Another example of how this funding pool is helping to support analysis and growth and policy solutions for growing organic seed systems. We are so grateful to our friends at OFRF for their close partnership in this project. We're also grateful to the Western Sustainable Ag Research and Education Program, another grant area that Jared identified earlier as being important to expanding organic seed systems. This particular SARE grant supported our co-author, Liza Wood, a PhD candidate at UC Davis, with a graduate research grant to support the project. It's because of this grant that we were able to collect even more data than we have in the past, and in particular, the seed producer survey. And then thanks to the many organic certifiers and nonprofit organic farming groups who helped distribute our organic producer survey so that we could get a good response rate, get good data, and of course, to all the growers, certifiers, researchers, and seed companies who actually took the time to fill out our survey. We are so grateful for everyone's investment in this research and analysis process. With that, I think we're going to open it up now for questions and discussion. We would love to hear your response to these findings and answer any questions that you may have.
So first question is, were you able to identify trends in land area and acres planted to organic seed as opposed to the number of producers?
Yeah, we did. I could, if we want, I could do a quick little screen share to show what that looks like. So this is from our data site that Kiki mentioned, but so this is looking instead to get to your question, the total acreage planted to organic seed from respondents. So in other words, it's weighting the percent of organic seed that was used based on the total acres that the producer had. So what we see, kind of adding up the total acreage of organic seed, or of organic acres planted to organic seed, is not a great trend either. We see that overall field crops planted to more organic seed, but a slightly decreasing trend. Cover crops, a large drop off. Forage crops, about the same, and around half of overall acreage. And then vegetable crops here at the bottom, with some, went from 31% of acreage to 23%, up to 35%. I want to point out that there's a lot of error in this, because let me see if I've got the other one up here, because this is really influenced by the largest producers and what they're using. So this is, as an example, this is percent vegetable acreage planted to organic seed. I think I might have showed this in the slide earlier, by acreage. So this is for vegetable producers. And let me just add the response numbers in here. It's got a little busy, but what you can see is that we hear from a lot of smaller producers here, less than 3 acres. There's, we heard from 200, less than 3 to 10 acres. We heard from, 100. As we get up to these really large scale vegetable producers, this year we had heard from 11 producers that were over 160 to 480 acres, only 2 greater than 480. And what you can see also is that they do not, in general, use as much organic seed. And so those producers both have a big influence on the overall acreage of organic seed being used, or overall organic acreage planted to organic seed. But also it really, with such small sample sizes, there's a lot of uncertainty there. If we talk to, 2 other, 480 acre plus or vegetable producers, would we have, seen different results? It seems possible.
Okay. Let's see. Does your equity program include low-income disabled farmers that are often overlooked by many programs? Do you look at farmer income and disability at all?
That's a great question, Robert. Thank you for that. When we talk about equity and promoting equity in our seed systems and our policy platform and program areas, we haven't named disabled growers specifically, and that's definitely an oversight and gap, and I appreciate you highlighting that. It certainly should be moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we have a comment here from Chris. Great recommendation to hold buyers and processors more responsible as well, so that there's more shared responsibility, so that the effort to source organic seed does not fall solely on the farmer.
Yeah, Chris, great comment. I'll just quickly underscore that the last thing we and our colleagues want to do is leave organic growers in a lurch by forcing them to use organic seed that may not be optimal for their systems. And so we're acutely aware of how policies and recommendations in general impact organic growers. Again, the last thing we want to do is create more burdens for them, which is why when it comes to our number one policy recommendation to strengthen the organic seed requirement, for what it's worth, we believe this is a very reasonable next step, because it leaves it up to certifiers to determine how best to measure that progress and to monitor an operation's success, understanding that there are seed crop failures and other factors that need to be accounted for year to year. So thanks for your comment. We hope to see more conversation and action on that contractor, on the processor and buyer piece.
Okay, thank you. We had a question from Vijay on what the distribution of awarded funding across different plant species was, for example, vegetables or cereals.
Yeah, it's a great question. I could probably show a slide again, or I can just tell you we kind of divided up into 4 broad categories of field crops, forage or cover crops, vegetable crops, and then other or multiple crops. And we found it was slightly over half of the total funding from 1996 through today was for field crops. And then the second was vegetable crops, receiving about a quarter of the funding. And then the forage and other receiving the remaining.
Okay, thank you. I just want to mention, I'm going to be sending you all a follow-up email with some of the many links that have been shared in the chat. So I really appreciate everybody sharing all these links. We had a great link in there. I don't know if it reached everyone, from Micah, who said she's in Europe. And she said that they did a survey as well, and that they came up with very similar results. And she thinks that large companies will not take over because organic seed production is not easy, more costly in production, and less profitable. I don't know if you have any comments about that.
Yeah, I saw a comment or two or a question about ensuring that the largest firms that currently dominate the industry don't take over organic seed production. First of all, I think there are a lot of related but tangential policy issues that are important to pay attention to and take action on. For example, Jared mentioned that for the first time, we asked questions around both researchers as well as organic seed producers' perspectives on intellectual property rights associated with seed. And in our view, the more that we can ensure that only fair and reasonable tools in the way of IPR are used on our seed systems, so that only IPR is used that don't restrict seed saving, that don't restrict ongoing plant breeding and research. This is one important strategy to ensure that innovation can continue in a more decentralized way. And that is directly related to the consolidated market power that we witness today and that growers operate within. I want to quickly mention and make a plug for a USDA comment period that's open right now that is asking for public input on the state of seed industry consolidation and competition concerns, and how those two issues relate to intellectual property rights on seed. Florentina, maybe you could pop in information about that in the chat box, but there are efforts underway to ensure that seed remains an open and accessible resource. And that is very much related to ensuring that organic seed moving forward is not only controlled, managed, and produced by the largest firms.
Okay, we had a couple of questions on the part of Jared's presentation that showed the research investments in organic seed and plant breeding and variety trials. And Freya asked whether that funding is biannual. I know many of those grants are 3 to 4 years long. She was wondering what causes the dips in funding from year to year.
Good question. Yeah, as Alice had said, many of these projects are, especially from OREI, might be 3 or 4 year projects, and the OREI has a wide range of priorities. Those change slightly year to year, but in general, organic seed and organic plant breeding is just one of the priorities, and so sometimes there's just a different basket of projects that are funded in one year versus another. So that's one of the reasons. The other is, I think, at least in one case, there was a year where OREI's funding lapsed for a year. So that had an impact.
Okay, yeah, and there was another question about whether that $40 million or so that you were talking about was just from the last couple of years since 2018, or whether that was for a longer period.
That was the last 5 years since our last
5 years.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so here's a question from Brian. Were you able to identify those processors who are requiring non-organic seed as part of their contracts? And how many such companies own the intellectual property of those varieties?
That's a great question, Brian. We do not have data to answer those questions.
Okay. Who are the recipients of the breeding and variety trials funding, the bulk of the funding from the pie chart, and where does the data that they generate live?
A good question. The recipients, if you go to the State of Organic Seed report and you download the full PDF version, at the end there's a table that has all of the recipient projects, what the organization was, the kind of how much they were funded for, and so you can see for yourself kind of what all the different projects were. As far as where the results of their breeding or trials live, there isn't. I know, Alice, you and I have put together a somewhat underutilized site for organic variety trial results. So that captures some of the variety trial results that have been done by many of the organizations, projects have their own project websites where you can see the results of their breeding efforts and their variety trials. I do think there continues to be value and an importance in having this be better consolidated and more accessible.
Definitely. Yeah, if you go to eOrganic and you look for the organic variety trial database, or just type that into Google, you should be able to find some of the trial data from a number of different projects, and Jared has been compiling those, but it certainly isn't complete from all the different funded projects across USDA agencies. And some of the data you might be able to find by going to the reports for, if you look up NIFA OREI and then finding the abstracts of the funded projects, you might find information on where they have data, but there isn't one centralized location where you can find absolutely everything. So we have a question from Jim here. If one saves seeds from produce, is this second generation seed organic if the production practices were organic?
Yes, so for seed to be certified organic, it needs to be grown for a full production year in a certified organic system.
Okay. Here is a question from Chris. Given the survey results and the stagnancy of the percentage of organic seed being used by farmers, is OSA considering new programming strategies to help increase organic seed use?
Yeah, our strategies are updated every 5 years. and are guided by the recommendations in the report. There's no one strategy to grow the organic seed supply. The challenge with growing organic seed systems is that a number of strategies need to move forward simultaneously, both from a policy perspective, organic plant breeding and research perspective, education and training, as well as data. This database that a couple of people have mentioned, to provide reliable, comprehensive info on how much an organic seed is even available to growers and where to find it. All of these pieces are necessary for growing organic seed systems and to make more progress toward the objectives that we identified in our report. So I hope that's a satisfactory enough answer, but this report guides both OSA's programs and ideally also serves as a touchstone for the broader organic community to support the development of organic seed systems. Perhaps to answer your question more directly, I'll just say that, advocating a bit harder for the policy changes that we shared earlier is definitely, I feel like it's not a shift from our previous recommendations, but we see that the regulatory piece as being even more important this time around, given that our data is demonstrating a stagnation of organic seed usage.
If somebody's selling direct at a farmer's market, their choice of varieties might be influenced by what those customers want, and those might not be available as organic seed.
Yeah, absolutely. As Jared pointed out, variety and availability continues to be the biggest challenge to sourcing more organic seed. And so that, for me, brings us back to the importance of exploring some type of feedback loop. So we hear from those market growers about what varieties their customers are asking for, and that may not be available in a certified organic form. So I think if we can get creative and proactive with those feedback loops, we can make more progress in that regard.
Yeah, this is a related question. If lack of variety is the main reason for growers not using organic seed, why aren't the seed producers unable to meet this demand? Are the seed producers aware about the varieties in demand?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we have, I don't want to say too many things that aren't supported by data. I don't think that we have, solid data on to directly answer that question, but I will maybe hypothesize a little, which is that when we look at variety availability, the varieties, seed producers, there are, as we found through our survey, many seed producers that are also seed companies and selling direct. There are also many seed producers that are working on contract to produce seed for other seed, for the seed companies that you actually would buy from, both for, seed producers who are selling direct as well as for seed companies, their ability to produce a variety. I think that we can reasonably assume that there's an understanding of where, by and large, where the markets are and what varieties are really important for producers at different scales and different regions for different needs. But those varieties, first off, they may have intellectual property around them. And so if that variety is something that's, ultimately was developed by, and the intellectual property rights are controlled by a conventional seed company that is not interested in licensing that to, or an organic seed company, organic seed producer, that's one barrier. Another is that, sometimes many of the best varieties, in terms of how they, in terms of their market demand, may have challenges in seed production. And so figuring out those seed production challenges, specifically producing that seed organically, there's a bit of a learning curve there. A large conventional seed company, for a highly profitable variety, they may actually have that production. One, they have conventional inputs to control diseases and pests, and two, they may actually produce that seed in 4 different places around the country, so that if it is something that's susceptible to different environmental challenges, they'll still get production out of that. Those kind of logistics become harder at the smaller scale that we're often operating at in the organic sector.
Okay, Sarah was wondering, has an organic seed database or catalog been started? I know that there have been several efforts over the years, and I know there are some, for example, you can find some on SeedLink. You can find, there is the Organic Seed Finder. I'm not sure how active that still is, or Pick a Carrot, I remember, was another website.
Yeah, and the current state, as I understand it, is unfortunately Pick a Carrot, which was very useful, is no longer available. The SeedLink, I think, is rapidly becoming more and more useful. It's relatively recently been launched to the public, but even in its initial launch, it has a pretty substantial list of varieties and a substantial list of kind of ratings and information that go with those varieties. And I anticipate in the coming years that that's going to get built out more and more. The Organic Seed Finder, Kiki, as I understand it, is not really being actively maintained at this point.
Yeah, I would say that the participation in Organic Seed Finder, participation in the way of organic seed suppliers has greatly dwindled. And right now, it's not serving as an up-to-date and comprehensive resource. There are other listings available that simply serve as a listing of organic seed suppliers. The Accredited Certifiers Association has a listing just via a document on their website. I believe the National Center for Appropriate Technology still has a listing of seed suppliers. All of these are definitely useful. I know that certifiers individually compile lists for the operations they certify as well to serve as a resource. And yet at the end of the day, they're a comprehensive, reliable database would be incredibly useful, again, for organic seed sourcing as well as the enforcement of the organic seed role.
Yeah, Micah was wondering whether or not something like that has ever been set up at the state level.
I am not sure outside of state-based organic certifiers.
Let's see, here is a question. I'm just trying to get it a little bit larger here. Okay, from Pam. When I talk about organic seed, I emphasize the importance of sourcing organic seed to the health of the earth. You seem to emphasize importance to the integrity of organically produced crops. I think an emphasis on soil and land health would be a significant help in promoting your goals. Is this emphasis promoted in your educational material at all?
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for naming that. I think in this presentation today, we did emphasize the importance to the integrity of the label and to producer success in meeting a regulatory requirement. Our report definitely goes a little bit deeper into the environmental and other benefits to expanding organic seed production. For example, we know that there are many conventional seed crops, such as brassicas, that require a lot of, that are grown with a lot of synthetic pesticides. And so that really exacerbates, the chemical footprint of that seed, if you will, and also the climate footprint, if you consider all the greenhouse gas emissions resulting from the production of synthetic chemical fertilizers and pesticides. And so we do discuss that a bit in the report, the environmental benefits to growing seed without relying on synthetic chemical inputs, as well as we also talk about how organic seed, or let me say it this way, seed that organic producers are allowed to use cannot be treated with a chemical seed coat. So oftentimes, like in conventional corn, for example, out of that corn seed being sold has a chemical insecticide and or fungicide coating on the outside of the seed. And we are learning through research just how detrimental those seed treatments are to ecosystems. And I guess I'll just stop there, but very good point. Thank you for sharing that. And we absolutely include those environmental benefits in our messaging, despite not emphasizing them more here today.
Thanks. Have people been satisfied with the quality of organic seed that they purchased?
Great
Yeah. So,
question. Go ahead, Jared. Yeah.
okay. Yeah. This is a question we actually asked in a lot more detail in our past reports, where we asked about lots of aspects of seed quality. And what we found in our previous reports was that there was a general satisfaction. I was, well, if I recall correctly, because I haven't looked at some of the questions that we ended up dropping in the survey recently, but in the 2011 survey, we saw a trend down in terms of people being concerned with various aspects of organic seed quality from 2011 to 2016. And so in this report, we kind of truncated some of those questions a little bit and just asked more broadly. And the question was, how much was distrust of organic seed quality a factor in your decision not to purchase organic seed? And what we saw was that around 80% of producers said it was not a factor at all. 10% said it was a slight factor, and then the remaining 10% said it was a moderate or significant factor. And that those more people this time around said it was not organic seed. Distrust of organic seed quality was not a factor. So what we see is that it's a relatively small subset. Still, there are still 10% that said it was a moderate to significant factor. So it is something that some producers have concerns with, but by and large, most do not, and that we've seen that trend decrease. In other words, fewer producers are concerned about organic seed quality over the course of the 15 years that we've been asking these questions.
So I'd like to just give a shout out to Kathleen McCluskey of Organic Seed Alliance, who's been very helpfully posting some great links into the chat to the Organic Variety Trial Database, as well as the USDA comment period that Kiki mentioned, and where you can file your own comments. And I'm going to be sending everybody all these links because there's been such great activity going on in the chat here. Also, Jen Kava is on, and she talks about where you can find the results of the Seed to Kitchen trials, which are trials that are going on at the University of Wisconsin in the upper Midwest. They have a network of growers there. So she posted their trial information, but I'm just going to have to send everything to everyone afterwards because there's just too much going on here. I'm going to just end with one final question here. What is your vision for how this report can best be used to advocate for change? What are your suggestions on how people can use this report or its data briefs to engage in seed advocacy?
A great question. Jared, I'm happy to take a stab with your additional input. We created those data briefs this time around in an attempt to make this information more accessible and digestible, especially by stakeholder groups, so that it would hopefully be easier, say, for organic regulators and certifiers to identify where we are seeing improvements and where we are not seeing more progress, and then to connect that to their role in supporting the expansion of organic seed systems. And so we, first of all, I encourage folks, if you want to stay up to speed on our efforts as they relate to this project, to sign up for our newsletter on our website. It only arrives in your inbox quarterly. We also have an option for signing up for policy action alerts. So this is an opportunity to get updates on, for example, the work of the National Organic Program and the Volunteer Advisory Board, the National Organic Standards Board, and their biannual meetings, to know when your voice is needed to advocate for some of these policy recommendations that we talked about today. So please stay engaged in our work. We want to hear from you. We want you to lend your voice when the opportunity is there to do so. Jared, you might have some additional ideas in the way of research and investments. We do not have an analysis of private investments going toward these types of research projects that support seed systems, whether it's plant breeding or other organic seed research, network development. We do know that more funding is needed, including for smaller grant type projects or to support equipment that seed growers need to professionalize their seed operation or to expand their seed operation, whether that's harvesting or cleaning their seed. And so there are a lot of opportunities for donors to play a part in this, for sure. If you're a storyteller, we need to continue to get out the message of why organic seed is important, and that the benefits, again, go well beyond just helping organic growers meet a regulatory requirement. Organic seed can be part of the solution to addressing climate change, and importantly, to help our food and agricultural systems more broadly adapt to these changes and to mitigate the risks that we know are happening every day for producers, and that includes seed producers. And so those are just a few ideas. I would be honored to continue this conversation with any of you one-on-one after this call to further explore how you can help get the word out about the findings in this report and to support some of the solutions moving forward.
I think following up on what Kiki said there, we, in a lot of ways, we have a lot to be, hopeful for from this report, seeing the recognition of the importance of organic seed from organic seed producers, seeing the kind of breadth of seed producers all around the country doing this good work and the strength of some of those networks, seeing the infusion of funding towards this. I would say, kind of tying back to what Kiki said, in terms of, what are some next steps, what are some needs? I'm not as familiar with the policy work, but I do see very much this need to strengthen the capacity, the sustainability for organic seed producers. So for farmers to be able to produce seed for this system, they, just like Kiki said, that there needs to be better support for, when we look at this research funding, a lot of it really, there was a relatively small slice for seed production. And even within that, there really aren't great supports for the capital, the infrastructure that seed producers need. There's a lot of specialized equipment. There's a lot of risk involved in seed production. So the, better support for that, and then better, I think, overall recognition of the kind of rights of seed producers and the more equity and equality in the system overall. Seed producers take on a lot of risk in producing seed, and that there are better ways to share that risk between the seed producers and companies, between seed producers and the greater seed system. And I think if we want to see more growth of organic seed, if we want to see this network continue to strengthen, we want to see good decentralized regional seed production addressing the needs of producers everywhere, that we need to support that grassroots better. I think in the chat I saw Holly Simpson kind of mentioned something along those lines. I just wanted to uplift that. I completely agree.
Okay, well, thank you both. And thanks to everyone for all your participation and engagement here. I promise I will go ahead and compile all this great information that was put in the chat today and send it to you all. We'd also be very grateful if you could fill out the follow-up survey, which you'll also be receiving in a separate email. And thank you to Kiki and Jared for presenting this. Thank you to the Organic Seed Alliance and its other participants that are on the call today, and put the link in to where you can subscribe to the Organic Seed Alliance newsletter so that you can get updates on future developments in this work. And thanks to everyone for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alice. Thanks to everyone joining.
Yeah, thank you.